Cole Whitlock thought he was the one holding the cards. He thought this little test of his, lying perfectly still with a hand near the pistol under his pillow, was clever. He'd pretend to sleep. And he'd let the two mail-order brides expose their own greed. But as their whispers floated across the dark cabin, he didn't hear the familiar poison of vanity or impatience. He heard betrayal. He heard his father's sins being spoken aloud. And Cole Whitlock realized with a sudden gut-freezing certainty that he wasn't the one running the test. He was the one being tested. The floorboards gave a low groan, a sound of old wood complaining under a careful footstep. Cole kept his breathing shallow, a slow, rhythmic pull and release, just like his father taught him. All those years ago, tracking outlaws through the scrub brush, his father had taught him the art of stillness, the silence of the hunter. The oil lamp on the mantelpiece threw dancing shadows against the rough-hewn log walls. He could smell the cornbread from supper, a homey scent that was now horribly twisted by the lavender soap the women had used. They'd arrived right on time, stepping off the afternoon stagecoach like two porcelain dolls. Margaret and Sarah Thornton. Sisters, they said, from back in Virginia, answering his carefully worded advertisement for wives. Margaret, the older one, had eyes that moved too fast. They seemed to take the measure of everything in the room, from the pewter candlesticks to the worn leather of his armchair, calculating its worth. Sarah was different, softer, younger. Her hands were never still, constantly twisting a simple gold ring she said had been her mother's. But something was wrong. Cole had felt it the second they'd stepped over his threshold. A current of unspoken purpose flowed between them, something that had nothing to do with finding a husband. This test, this cruel little charade of feigned sleep, was born from 5 years of bitter disappointment. 5 mail-order brides, each one a viper in a pretty dress. The first had tried to steal the deed to his ranch on her second day. The second had tried to poison his morning coffee, hoping to become a wealthy widow before she was even a wife. The third, he discovered, was the scout for a gang of cattle rustlers. So now he always did this. The first night, he would lie in his bed, silent and still, and he would listen. He'd let them think he was asleep. He'd let them show him the truth of who they were. But these two were not like the others. "He's not breathing right," Margaret whispered. Her voice was so low, a mere rustle of sound in the quiet room, that Cole almost didn't catch it. "Look at his chest. That's not how a man breathes in deep sleep." Cole's heart gave a single violent thump against his ribs. A wild animal caught in a trap. No one had ever noticed that before. Not once. "You think he's listening?" Sarah's voice was a thread of sound, thin with a fear that sounded terrifyingly real. "I know he's listening." Margaret's voice was sharp, cutting through the shadows. "The question isn't if he's listening. The question is why." A cold sweat broke out across Cole's forehead. Every muscle in his body screamed at him to move, to sit up and end this game. But a deeper, colder instinct kept him pinned to the mattress. They weren't whispering about his money. They weren't plotting how to get their hands on his land. They were studying him, like a wolf studies a buck, looking for the weakness, for the perfect moment to strike. "Margaret, I can't." Sarah's voice broke. "Every time I look at him, I see Papa's face. I see what Papa did to our family." The words struck Cole with the force of a physical blow. Papa, his family. What in God's name was she talking about? "Keep your voice down," Margaret hissed, the sound venomous. "We have come too far. We have waited too long to lose our nerve now." "But what if Mama was wrong?" Sarah pleaded. "What if this man, Cole Whitlock, isn't responsible for what happened? What if Papa lied about that too?" Cole's mind was a maelstrom. Thornton children. The name, Thornton, ripped through his memory like a bolt of lightning splitting an old oak tree. 25 years ago, the wagon train massacre. His father, the revered Sheriff Thomas Whitlock, had led the investigation himself. He'd stood over the burned-out husks of the wagons and declared it the work of Apache raiders. The entire Thornton family, he'd said. Parents and 4 children, every last one of them gone. But that was a lie, because 2 of them were standing in his cabin right now, and they were very, very much alive. Mama didn't lie. Margaret's voice was as cold and hard as river ice in January. She spent 15 years in that Apache camp, Sarah. 15 years. Passed from one warrior to the next because our father sold us. The room seemed to tilt, the shadows on the wall swimming before Cole's eyes. She remembered every single detail, Margaret went on, her voice a relentless, low-toned hammer. She remembered how Sheriff Whitlock took Papa's money. She remembered the look on his face as he watched Papa hand over his own children to pay a gambling debt. Cole's world fractured, his father, his hero, the man who had carved the words justice and honor into the very beams of this house, the man whose silver sheriff's badge was still tucked away in his top desk drawer, a sacred relic. Thomas Whitlock helped our father destroy our family, Margaret stated, not with anger, but with the flat, dead certainty of a final judgment. And now his son is going to pay. The cabin was dead silent. The only sounds were the soft crackle of the embers in the fireplace and the frantic, suffocating thunder of Cole's own heart. He wanted to scream. He wanted to leap out of the bed and tell them they were liars, that his father was a good man, a protector, a pillar of the community. But a chilling cold was spreading through his veins, awakening memories he had forced into the deepest, darkest corners of his mind. Questions he had never dared to ask. Why did his father always have money, pockets full of silver dollars, when other lawmen were barely scraping by? Why did certain criminal cases just disappear? Files lost, witnesses vanished. Why, in the week before he died, did his father spend 3 long nights burning his old papers and ledgers in the fireplace, saying the past was a country best left unvisited? Tomorrow morning, Margaret's whisper sliced through the silence, we tell him the truth. We show him Mama's journal, every last sordid detail, every name, every family Thomas Whitlock sold out. And then? Sarah's voice was barely audible. And then, Margaret said, her voice dropping even lower, filled with a chilling satisfaction. Then Cole Whitlock learns exactly what it feels like to have his entire world burned to the ground. Cole's hands, hidden beneath the heavy wool blanket, were trembling uncontrollably. Each word these women spoke was a fresh twist of a knife in his soul. He was drowning, suffocating under the weight of a truth he had never suspected. His father, a monster. His life, a lie. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy, until Sarah spoke again, her voice choked with unshed tears. I still remember that last morning, Maggie. I remember it so clearly. Mama was braiding my hair. She was humming a little song. Papa promised us we were going to have a better life in California, a house by the ocean. I was only 7, but I remember the smell of bacon frying and how excited I was. Don't, Margaret's voice was sharp, don't do that to yourself. But I have to remember, Sarah insisted, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. I need to remember what we lost, what he and his father took from us. Cole bit down on his tongue, the sharp tang of blood filling his mouth. His father was not a monster. His father was Sheriff Thomas Whitlock, the man who tamed Copper Ridge, the man who made this territory safe for decent folks, the man who taught him to read from the family Bible, his big, calloused hand resting on Cole's shoulder. But even as his mind screamed denials, the other memories pushed their way to the surface. Dark, ugly memories he'd spent a lifetime burying. His father's long, unexplained trips into the Apache territories, the heavy saddlebags he'd bring back, always clinking with coins, which he'd wave off as bounty money. The way he'd burned those files, his face grim and shadowed in the firelight, muttering that some things were better left as ash. And the look, that strange, haunted look in his eyes whenever anyone in town brought up the Thornton massacre. "Tell me again what Mama wrote," Sarah whispered, a desperate plea. "About that last day." Margaret's voice dropped, becoming a conspiratorial murmur. Cole had to strain his ears, focusing with every ounce of his being. Papa had been gambling with a man named Vicente Morales, a bad man. He lost everything: the wagons, the mules, the money Mama had sewn into the hem of her dress. When he couldn't pay his marker, Morales made him an offer. Margaret paused, and in the silence Cole could hear Sarah take a shaky breath. The Apache were always looking for captives, not to keep, but to trade further south. Blonde women and children, they fetched the highest prices. A wave of nausea washed over Cole. This was a nightmare, a horrible, vicious lie. Morales told Papa he could clear his entire debt. All he had to do was deliver his own family to a pre-arranged meeting point. And Sheriff Whitlock, Margaret's voice was flat, devoid of all emotion, would make sure the official investigation never looked too closely. It would be just another tragic Apache raid. Case closed. And Papa agreed, Sarah whispered, her voice cracking with a 25-year-old agony. Our own father. Sheriff Whitlock met them at Devil's Canyon, Margaret continued, her words precise and deadly. Mama saw him. She was hiding us under a canvas tarp in the back of the wagon, but she saw him. She saw your father count out the silver pieces, his face like stone, while we huddled together, too young and too scared to understand. 30 pieces of silver, Margaret said, for each of us. The Apache came for us after dark. Cole wanted to roar, to leap from the bed and call them liars to their faces. But he couldn't move. Something in their voices, a raw, undeniable ring of truth, held him paralyzed. What I don't understand, Sarah said after a long moment, her voice filled with a child's confusion, is why Mama never tried to escape sooner. 15 years, Margaret. Why did she wait so long? Because she was broken, Sarah. Margaret's reply was brutal. Body and soul. You were so little. You don't remember what they did, what they turned us into. The silence that followed was a living thing. It pressed down on Cole, stealing the air from his lungs. He could feel the sweat soaking his nightshirt, could hear the blood pounding in his ears. It was the only sound in a world that had suddenly gone dead quiet. But we survived, Margaret said at last, her voice a sliver of forged steel. And now we're here. To make the Whitlocks pay. How can we make him pay for what his father did? Sarah argued, her voice trembling. He was just a boy then. He was probably younger than I was. Because he built this entire life on our family's blood, Margaret shot back, her voice rising with sudden, fierce intensity. Every acre of this ranch you see, Sarah, every head of cattle in his fields, every nail in this house, it was all paid for with the silver your father earned selling children. Cole's carefully constructed world wasn't just cracking, it had been obliterated. His ranch, his legacy, the foundation his father had left him, it was all built on a bedrock of unimaginable evil. But Margaret wasn't done. Oh no, she hadn't even delivered the killing blow yet. And there's another reason, she said, her voice dropping to a deadly, calm whisper that was more terrifying than any shout. Cole Whitlock isn't nearly as innocent as he likes to pretend. Mama's journal mentioned something else, a detail she never forgot, not in 15 years. The day we were taken, at Devil's Canyon. There was a boy, watching from the rocks on the ridge high above, a boy with his father's eyes, who saw every single thing that happened. A boy who saw it all, and said nothing. Cole's blood didn't just run cold, it turned to solid ice in his veins. He remembered. Oh God, he remembered. He'd followed his father that day, sneaking behind him like he always did, wanting to be just like the great Sheriff Whitlock. He'd hidden in the rocks, his heart pounding with a boy's excitement, watching a strange meeting he didn't understand. His father, talking to some rough-looking men, a wagon, the glint of silver coins changing hands. He'd been 12 years old. He hadn't understood what he was seeing, not really, but his father had found him on the way home. His face was a mask of thunder. He'd grabbed Cole by the shoulders, his fingers digging in hard, and he had sworn him to absolute secrecy. "That was just business, son," his father had said, his voice low and urgent. "Sometimes, to keep the peace, a sheriff has to make difficult choices. Sometimes a few people get hurt so that many more can stay safe. You understand me, boy?" And Cole, who worshipped the ground his father walked on, had nodded. He'd trusted him. Completely. He'd taken that memory and buried it so deep inside himself that he'd almost managed to convince himself it was just a bad dream. Until this very moment. That boy. Margaret's whisper echoed in the silent cabin, a ghostly accusation from the past. Grew up to be the man lying in that bed. The man who is going to learn tomorrow that some secrets don't stay buried. They fester, and then they rise from the grave to demand a reckoning. Cole felt a crushing weight on his chest, as if the whole world was pressing down, trying to squeeze the life out of him. The weight of 25 years of a buried, poisoned truth. But he didn't move. He couldn't. He had to hear it all. He had to know the full, monstrous scope of his father's sins and the true depth of his own silent guilt. "I can't sleep." Sarah's voice was fragile like thin glass. "Every time I close my eyes, I see his face. That boy on the ridge, 12 years old, just watching them sell us like we were cattle, and he did nothing." "He was a child, Sarah." Margaret's voice was surprisingly soft. "His father had a hold on him. He manipulated that boy just as surely as Papa manipulated us." "But he grew up," Sarah countered, her voice hardening. "He grew up knowing what he saw. He built this fortune on our family's suffering, and he never once tried to find out what happened to us. He never tried to help. He never tried to make it right." Cole wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that he didn't know, but the words caught in his throat, turning to ash in his mouth. Because she was right. In that deep, dark place inside himself that he never looked at, he had always known. He'd known something terrible and wrong had happened that day at Devil's Canyon, and he had made a choice. He chose to believe his father's comforting lies instead of facing the horrifying truth. "So what is the plan exactly?" Sarah asked, her voice low and tense. "What do we do tomorrow morning? We show him the journal, and then what? We watch him weep? We make him apologize? What good will an apology do us now?" Cole heard the rustle of fabric, the soft creak of the floorboards, as Margaret moved closer to her sister. "We're not here for an apology," Margaret said. "We're here to give him a choice. The same choice our father was given all those years ago." "What do you mean?" "I mean we're going to offer him a trade," Margaret said. A trade. The word sent a fresh wave of ice through Cole's body. "His freedom, for his confession," Margaret continued, her voice cold and methodical. "We want him to write it all down, every crime his father committed, his own part in it, every name he can remember from his father's secret ledgers. Then we want him to sign it, witnessed and dated." "And if he refuses?" Sarah asked. "Then we destroy him," Margaret said simply, "the same way his father helped destroy us." "We have the evidence, Sarah. Mama's journal is just the start. She kept 3 of the silver pieces your father gave Papa. She stole letters between Sheriff Whitlock and that gambler Morales before she finally escaped. She spent years gathering proof." Cole's hands clenched into fists beneath the blanket. This wasn't just a story. This was a case that could not only destroy his reputation, but could see him hanged. "We will take that evidence to every newspaper from here to San Francisco," Margaret vowed. "We will stand on the steps of every courthouse in this territory, and we will tell our story. We will make the name Whitlock a synonym for corruption and betrayal for the next 100 years. But what if he agrees? Sarah's voice was laced with uncertainty. What if he writes the confession? Then we take that confession to the territorial governor, Margaret said, and we demand justice, not just for us, for every family Thomas Whitlock sold out. Because Mama's journal lists others, Sarah. We weren't the only ones. Others. The word was a hammer blow to Cole's already shattered world. How many? How many families had his father ruined? How many lives had been traded for bags of silver? And as for Cole Whitlock himself, Margaret's voice turned hard as granite, he will lose everything, just as we did. This ranch, his cattle, his money. The governor will seize it all as assets gained through criminal acts. He will know what it feels like to wake up one morning and have nothing left but the clothes on his back. But he'll still be free, Sarah pointed out. Yes, Margaret agreed. He will have his freedom. The freedom to live with the knowledge of what his family did. The freedom to start over with nothing, just like we had to. The freedom to spend every remaining day of his life knowing he stood by and watched it happen. Cole realized he hadn't taken a breath in over a minute. He gasped silently, the air burning his lungs. The room felt like a tomb. Everything he had ever believed, everything he had ever been proud of, was gone, turned to dust and lies. But then he heard something else in Margaret's voice, a strange, unexpected note. It wasn't vengeance. It sounded almost like a sliver of hope. Unless, she said, her voice dropping so low it was almost a prayer. Unless what? Sarah whispered. Unless Cole Whitlock proves that he is not his father's son. Unless he chooses to do the one thing Thomas Whitlock never did. Make it right. There was a long, ringing silence. Cole's mind, numb with shock and horror, struggled to grasp her meaning. How can he possibly make this right, Margaret? Sarah's voice was full of despair. Our parents are gone. Our childhoods were stolen. The other families your father destroyed, most of them are likely dead. Their children might not be, Margaret countered softly. Or their grandchildren. And there are still captives in the Apache territories. Not all of them taken in trades your father arranged, but they are there. Women and children living the life Mama lived. With Cole's money, with his resources, we could fund real rescue missions. We could hire trackers. We could find the other victims listed in Mama's journal. We could build something good from all of this horror. Cole's heart, which he thought had stopped beating, gave a painful lurch. They weren't just here for revenge. They were here to offer him a choice, an impossible, life-altering choice. You're talking about him giving up everything he owns, Sarah said, her voice filled with disbelief. To help people he has never even met. No, Margaret said, her voice clear and strong in the darkness. I'm talking about Cole Whitlock choosing to become the man his father never had the courage to be. The silence that followed was absolute. Cole lay frozen, a man on the gallows, realizing that his entire life, everything he was and everything he would be decided by the choice he made when the sun came up. His fortune, his legacy, his very name, all of it weighed against a mountain of suffering. And somewhere in the ruins of his world, a single, tiny flame flickered to life. The chance, however small, to turn a legacy of sin into a legacy of salvation. Dawn came slowly, creeping through the cabin windows like a truth that could no longer be ignored. Cole hadn't slept. He had lain awake all night, staring into the darkness, the sister's words replaying in his mind like a funeral dirge. He stared at the ceiling beams. Beams his father had cut and placed with his own 2 hands. Beams that came from trees grown on land bought with blood money. In the main room he could hear the women moving, the soft scrape of the coffee grinder, the clink of mugs. They were speaking in low tones, no longer whispering. They knew he was awake. The game was over. He sat up, his body a single, throbbing ache from the tension that had gripped him for hours. His hands trembled as he reached for his boots, the same boots he had worn just yesterday as he'd walked his land, his heart filled with a pride that now felt like poison. When he entered the main room, they both turned. Their faces were pale in the thin morning light, their eyes shadowed with exhaustion. For the first time, he could clearly see the terrified children from his memory locked away inside these grown women, especially in Sarah's eyes. They still held a ghost of that same frightened innocence. "We know you heard us," Margaret said. Her voice was flat, matter-of-fact. "No more games, Mr. Whitlock." Cole could only nod, his throat a knot of shame and fear. Sarah stepped forward. In her hands, she held a small, worn, leather-bound book, a journal. "This was our mother's," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "She wrote in it every day, for 15 years. She wrote down everything your father did, every person he betrayed." Cole stared at the book, as if it were a coiled rattlesnake. "She escaped 3 years ago," Margaret continued, her gaze fixed on him, unblinking. "She died this past winter from a lung fever. But before she died, she made us promise that we would find you, and that we would give you the choice your father never gave to anyone." "What choice?" Cole managed to rasp, his voice a dry croak. Margaret turned and walked to the window, gazing out at the vast expanse of his ranch, the land stretching all the way to the hazy blue mountains on the horizon. "Your father died a rich and respected man," she said, her back still to him. "He never answered for his crimes. You can do the same. You can deny everything. You can call us liars and throw us out. You can live out your days on this ranch, with this secret eating you alive from the inside out." She turned back to face him, her eyes burning with a cold fire. "Or," she said, her voice dropping, "you can be the man your father never was." Sarah opened the journal. Cole saw pages covered in a small, neat script. There were sketches of faces, maps of canyons, lists of names and dates, a meticulous record of 25 years of unimaginable evil. "She wrote about you too," Sarah said softly, her eyes meeting his. "The boy on the ridge. She saw your face that day, Cole. She wrote that she saw the confusion in your eyes, the horror when you finally realized what was happening. She wrote that she knew you were just a child, another victim caught in your father's web." Cole's legs buckled. He stumbled backward and fell into a chair, burying his face in his hands. A dry, racking sob tore through him. I should have said something," he choked out. "You were 12 years old," Margaret stated, her voice unyielding. "But you are not 12 years old anymore." Cole looked up, peering at them through the gaps in his fingers. His vision was blurry with tears he hadn't shed in 30 years. "What do you want from me?" he whispered. Sarah closed the journal and placed it gently on the table between them. "Everything," she said. The word hung in the air, simple and absolute. "Your confession, signed and witnessed," Margaret elaborated. "The complete liquidation of your father's assets, this ranch, the cattle, the money in the bank, all of it converted into a fund to rescue other captives and compensate the families he destroyed. Your life, from this day forward, dedicated to undoing the evil that Thomas Whitlock brought into this world." "And if I refuse?" Cole asked, though he already knew the answer. "Then we destroy you," Margaret said without a trace of emotion. "The way your family destroyed ours." She took a step closer, her gaze intense. "But you need to understand something, Cole. We didn't ride all this way just for revenge. We came because our mother, after everything she endured, still believed in redemption. She believed that the children can sometimes heal the things the parents have broken." Cole's gaze fell to the journal on the table. He understood that to open that book, to read those words, would be to cross a line from which he could never return. Inside its worn leather covers was the proof of his father's evil. But maybe, just maybe, it was also a map to a place he had never imagined he could find, a place called justice. "There's something else," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. "Something we didn't say last night." Cole looked up, his heart sinking. He wasn't sure he could bear another revelation. "The Apache who held us," she began, choosing her words carefully. "They weren't all monsters. Many of them were just people, trying to survive in a world that was trying to crush them. This trade, this horrible trade, it was orchestrated by men like your father and Vicente Morales. They exploited everyone." "Some of the children who were taken," she continued, her eyes pleading with him to understand. "They grew up in the camps. They don't remember anything else. They have families now. They have children of their own, who are half Apache." Margaret nodded grimly. "Rescuing them isn't as simple as riding in and bringing them out. For some, we'd be tearing them away from the only life they have ever known. This isn't about just saving them. It's about healing them, reconnecting them with families who have mourned them for decades, if that's what they choose." The weight of it was staggering. It wasn't a simple question of money. It was a tangled web of human lives, of broken families and shattered cultures, stretching back for a generation. It would take more than just his fortune. It would take his entire life. Cole pushed himself to his feet and walked to the window, looking out at the golden light of the morning sun painting the fields and hills. The land he had always believed was his birthright, his legacy. Now he saw it for what it was, a beautiful monument built on a foundation of betrayal and blood. "If I do this," he said, his voice thick with the enormity of the sacrifice, "I lose everything." Sarah came to stand beside him. She didn't look at the ranch. She looked at him. "No, Cole," she said softly. "If you do this, you gain the only thing that has ever mattered." He turned and looked at them. He no longer saw two vengeful strangers who had come to destroy him. He saw the broken children his father had helped to create, children who had somehow grown into women with enough strength, enough grace, to offer a path to redemption instead of just a demand for retribution. He walked to the heavy oak desk in the corner of the room, his father's desk. He pulled out a clean sheet of paper, a bottle of ink, and a pen. He sat down, and as he began to write, his hand, which had been trembling all morning, was suddenly steady. He wrote the truth about Thomas Whitlock. He wrote the truth about Devil's Canyon. And he wrote the truth about the choice he was now making, a choice to spend the rest of his days trying to heal the wounds his own family had torn into the world. Outside, the sun climbed higher, warming a ranch that would soon have a new purpose. But inside the cabin, 3 survivors of a terrible legacy began the long, hard work of turning generational sin into generational healing. Cole wrote for hours, his hand cramping as he filled page after page with the dark secrets of his father's life. When the last word was written, he signed his name at the bottom with a flourish that felt less like an ending and more like a beginning. He looked up at Margaret and Sarah, the 2 women who had torn his world apart only to give him a new one, a world with purpose. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice raw. For the very first time since she had walked into his life, Margaret smiled. It was a small, tired smile, but it was real. "Now," she said, "we get to work." And as Cole stood up from his father's desk, leaving the confession lying there like a snake that had shed its skin, he felt a lightness he hadn't known was possible. For the first time in 25 years, Cole Whitlock was finally, truly free. Sometimes the stories that shake us the most are the ones that force us to look at the darkness we inherit and ask ourselves what we're going to do about it. Cole Whitlock was given a choice between clinging to a lie or sacrificing everything for the truth. His decision reminds us that we all have the power to break the cycles we were born into, to choose healing over bitterness and redemption over revenge. If this story made you think, if it challenged you to consider the weight of the past and the hope of the future, then you've found the right place. Here on this channel, we dig into the complicated moral heart of the frontier, telling the stories of ordinary people faced with extraordinary choices, choices that didn't just define their own lives, but the lives of generations that followed. To make sure you don't miss a single one of these powerful tales, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. It's the best way to join us as we explore these forgotten corners of history. Your support is what allows us to keep bringing these important stories to light. Stories that remind us that no matter how dark the legacy we inherit, the choice to build a better future is always in our hands. What choice would you have made in Cole's position? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one. And remember, the most powerful stories are the ones that stay with you long after they're over.